basically two aspects. And both the aspects, they are pedagogical. The first is purely pedagogical, and the second is also pedagogical, but that is in its own right. And I'll explain later that why I'm saying that this is in its own right is pedagogical, and why the first one is purely pedagogical. The first one, which is purely pedagogical and which is purely practical, is that it is not a very good idea that we are having two systems, two streams running together. One is 5 years law program, which is annual based, and one is 5 years law program, which is semester based. The semester programs, or the semester-based programs, they are to be run by the universities, and the annual programs, they are to be run by the affiliated colleges. And if you compare the content of these two programs, they are not in sync. And this is a matter of grave concern for the academics and for the lawyers, obviously, and the legal community, that the difference between the content of 5 years LLB semester-based and 5 years LLB annual-based is on those areas which were primarily the focus of legal education while redesigning the whole curriculum for 5 years law. And those areas include, number one, the compulsory internship program. As Barrister Saab has rightly pointed out, that in 5 years law program annual based, there is no requirement of any internship, which is requirement, compulsory requirement having 3 credit hours in semester based, that is not required in annual based. The second difference is that in annual based, every student, before passing out the final 10th semester, they are required to do their dissertation. Dissertation after, of course, having a knowledge of research methodology in 9th semester and in the 10th semester. And that is altogether absent in our annual program. And other difference which is creating a difference between the two programs is that in semester-based programs, there is requirement of 3 credit hours moot cases training. And moot cases training means that actually by practicing on actual cases, students are required to learn about the advocacy skills, and which is absent in the annual-based program. The fourth difference is that in semester-based programs, during final year of the semester-based program, I mean 9th and 10th semester, students are required to pick up from a list of almost 30 subjects which are contemporary in nature. They are required to pick at least 4 subjects for their legal studies as elective subjects. And that option is altogether absent in annual-based programs. So if you analyze or if you equate both the programs, the big gap exists between the annual and semester-based program, which are already been run under the same council, Pakistan Bar Council, and accredited by the same council and run under the directions of HEC. So that difference actually creates the difference in the skill set of the students, because in Lahore only, there are more colleges than universities who are training lawyers. That means more students who are being trained by colleges, they lack in research skills, they lack in advocacy skills, they lack in contemporary subjects like cyber laws and all these contemporary IP laws, etc. They lack in those. All these students, they lack the skill set when they pass out from the colleges. So the first thing was that was directly pedagogical step. Now coming to my second point, which I pointed out in the beginning, that is again the pedagogical, but it's in its own right, and that is the IT. IT is becoming a very, very debatable and discussable thing in academia globally, because now internationally the factor which is giving this impetus to the academia that why IT, which was an independent discipline previously, is to be added in legal education. Why? I am just referring to one research that was done in the Turin University, Italy. They identified at least 9 big areas where startups have already, new startups, they have already amalgamated IT with law for the dispensation of the justice, for the end users, for the lawyers, for administration of justice. Like I have pointed them out because due to paucity of time, I cannot explain each and everything here, but I am just pointing them out one by one. The first is the document automation and assembly. This is by yourself doing automatic document production. The second is lawyers marketplace. That is to be a marketplace accessible between the lawyers and the end users. The third is practice management and case management software. It's an amazing software because it is doing all those management skills which due to backlog and we are suffering from, that is to be done through the application of that software created by some startups globally. The next is document accessibility and draft documents. This is again self-doing documentation with links to word processing programs and the templates, facilitation of creating most common documents by yourself. Then, of course, legal engines for legal research. They are known to almost everybody. Then predictive analytical and litigation data mining. That is highly important, where artificial intelligence, they give a direction by data mining techniques and by artificial intelligence, then how predictive analysis of the propositions could be done. Then electronic discovery. Then I am recalling Justice Jilani's contribution towards ADR. Now we are switching to, sir, with your permission, we are switching to ODR. This is online dispute resolution. So ODR is also in use by the startups. This is with help of online dispute resolution. And then the data security gadgets and management system, those are always also available. So these are different types of startups which are already working in the field of IT along with legal education. Now coming to the third aspect, and that is that when I talk about legal education, my biggest concern is the methodology of legal education, because so far whatever we are doing improving the curriculum of legal education. We have improved in that area, though I agree, but as far as the methods are concerned, we are far behind the global trends in learning. I propose before this August audience, and that I am applying at my university, and I have prepared one batch so far, and that is based on experiential learning. Experiential learning is basically creation of US model, and that is the outcome of McRate in 1992. That report was created in order to overhaul the US legal education system. And they have identified few skills and values. They have identified those values and skills, and students are measured or assessed on the basis of the learning outcomes of those values and skills, not generally the general education, but according to the skills they have learned during their training at law schools. And incidentally, through 2017's Pakistan Engineering Council signed Washington Accord. And according to Washington Accord, Pakistan Engineering Council was required to go for outcome-based learning education system. This is called OBE, and they are required to go by that. And OBE is incidentally quite similar to experiential learning system. HEC, by seeing the successful application of OBE by engineering faculty, now HEC is urging all the faculties in the universities that they should also go by the OBE system. And incidentally, OBE system is very close to experiential learning system, because in experiential learning system, we point out some certain values and skills, and in OBE, this is the objective assessment of the learning outcomes. And this is done by doing, I'm giving just a little example, just to give a highlight of how these two systems, they go hands in hands, that in OBE, as well as in experiential learning system or the clinical legal system model, Sure, I'm just winding up. That's why I'm not reading the paper. I know I have time constraint. But let me give one example, finally, and that is that the learning outcomes, they are actually premised before making a study plan. And according to the learning outcomes, the study plan is prepared. And that plan is to be assessed and measured on the basis of another taxonomy, which is Bloom's taxonomy, and perhaps that would become complex, but this is an ideal system where you can definitely quantitatively analyze the skill set of the student. This is PRISM, and PRISM has 7 stages. So exactly being academic, I can give you a picture to the bar and to the related all areas. I can give you exact picture that my student is on the 4th level of cognitive learning, at 3rd level of effective learning, and on perhaps 2nd level of psychomotor learning. So these are different standards where quantitatively you can calculate the outcome of the studies. So I propose that, and I am ending my paper here with 4 proposals. 1, programs to be synced and standardized. It will be annual based, the colleges and the universities. Secondly, IT should be given debate, should be given a discussion that how much and how the IT should be incorporated in our curriculum. The third is that experiential learning should be given a try, because I have given that a try. And I have suggested before this August audience that at least we should start experiential learning by preparing a pool of teachers first, and then that pool can go back to their institutions and they can teach, or they can share with rest of their colleagues that what have they learned in that pool. So these are my submissions, and thank you very much for once again. Thank you.
I'm glad I'm through with the education, because with the techniques that you have over there, it is very difficult to get away with what we got away with. Thank you. Our final speaker, Ijaz Ahmed Qureshi. He's going to speak on Institution of Ombudsman and Administrative Justice.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Honorable Chairman of the session, Honorable Judges of the Superior Courts, distinguished members of the legal fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I wish to thank the Honorable Chairman of the session for his kind remarks. I recall when we were pursuing implementation of jail reforms report prepared by the Federal Ombudsman, and we met him, and he was Chief Justice of Peshawar High Court. In the forthcoming manner, he helped us implement those reforms, and even deputing 2 honorable judges of the Peshawar High Court to help us. So I remember his forthrightness in some of these things. I also wish to recognize among the participants the presence of Honorable Chief Justice, former Chief Justice of Supreme Court, Mr. Tasaddaq Hussain Jilani, with whom we were class fellows for 4 years in FC College, and then subsequent many decades of friendship and very, very rewarding experience. And there are many other friendly members, and it's a privilege to come and talk about institution of Ombudsman and Administrative Justice. I have a fairly long association with this institution, and to cover all its activities, one could deliver a more extempore lecture, but knowing the time constraint, I have resorted to written speech so that I don't waste your time. And secondly, coming at the last of the panel, a certain amount of fatigue and monotony can set in, and I would not like to transgress on that. I'll leave a lot of things if there is interest in the question-answer sessions to address. Ladies and gentlemen, as you all may be aware, the Wafaki Muhtasib office was established through a presidential order, number 1 of 1983, basically to diagnose, investigate, redress, and rectify any injustice done to person through maladministration by any federal agency. Currently, we have our head office in Islamabad with 15 regional offices all across the country. So far, during this period of 40 years, we have more than 1.8 million households issues have been redressed by the grace of Allah. And only last year, we disposed of 106,000 complaints. And if you translate it into working days, it comes to 500 cases a day that we have to decide. And our clientele is common man of Pakistan. As our name suggests, ombudsman is being a Swedish word. It is citizens advocate. So we try to work with the legal fraternity, the people's grievances against government agencies. And you would be surprised to know that there are more than 180 federal agencies, ministries, departments, against whom complaints are addressed, and we like to redress that. And an important feature of this is that only less than 1% go to appeal to the President of Pakistan, which is our appellate body, or for review to us. So it's always less than 1%. So we try to be as fair, judicious, as well as equitable to the complainant as well as the government. This office has come of age in fulfilling its obligations in the dispensation of speedy relief and justice to people. It has changed its approach from being proactive, from reactive to proactive and interactive, and move on from redressing not only individual complaints, but looking into the root causes of persistent complaints against agencies. And so far, in the last few years, we have completed 27 studies of various government agencies where people have difficulties, and those recommendations were sent to the government for implementation. Some of those are we still implementing on the directions of the Chief Justice of Supreme Court, like jail reforms and a few others. But otherwise, government gets an independent, a professional set of recommendations. These are prepared by professionals and our senior advisors who are retired civil servants, who are retired members of the judiciary and other walks of life. And the quality is that their practicability, so that those can be implemented. These are the people who are in government service. They know what is practicable, what is possible, and there may be some reports which are theoretic and academic and very difficult to implement. Ladies and gentlemen, under a new initiative called Outreach Complaint Resolution, the Office of Federal Ombudsman has started resolving public complaints closer to the doorsteps of the complainant through field visits of his offices. Since 2016, we have addressed more than 45,000 such complaints at the tehsil level, at the major town level. Then a number of other fruitful initiatives to reach out to the public at large, facilitation of the overseas Pakistanis. We have a full-fledged wing which deals with overseas Pakistanis. We deal at the mission level. We facilitate their work at our Pakistani missions. We facilitate their work at the Foreign Office level. And then we have one window operation set up in all the international airports where their complaints can be redressed. And 12 agencies representative are sitting in these one window operations in international airports. So last year, we were able to address more than 40,000, and this year already we are crossing 60,000. So there is a mechanism where these complaints can be handled through our office. Another aspect, a recent one which we have introduced since I took over as Federal Ombudsman in January this year, we have gone into the field of ADR under our Article 33. We can mediate between agencies, public, within public, through mediation, conciliation. And you would be surprised to know that how much appetite or need there is in this society, that people who cannot afford to go to the court and afford a lawyer and wait certain years in resolution of some of the smaller nature cases, they are coming to us, and our office being independent, being manned by professionals, advisors, they are taking their services, and we are resolving some of those issues. Already in the last 5 months, we have reached figure of 600, apart from our regular work, which we undertake through our legal process of complaint handling. This is an informal way of helping people, providing services to people at large. Apart from that, there was felt a need to go out in various areas because it's a very vast country, Balochistan, Sindh, interior Sindh, tribal areas. Our advisors are going to those places in holding open kacharis, khuli kacharis, in which all sort of complaints come in, and some may relate to the provincial government, which we pass on to provincial ombudsman, and we have very close coordination, and they get resolved, they get addressed. And as I said, more than 180 federal agencies, so they come to us and we address those. And the biggest one are normally against electricity disco companies, the Sui Gas, NADRA, SAS program, Passport Office, and other similar agencies, Insurance Corporation, etc. We felt the need that children also need our attention. They are below 18 and below. They don't have a say in the decision making or the right to vote. So we have created a special wing for children. We not only look at their individual complaints, but mostly systemic issues. And recently, we have prepared a report, professionally done, on the street children of Islamabad. And we thought that we'll make it a prototype, a pilot activity. If we can implement it with the help of government agencies, then it could be replicated to other agencies. It's a major problem. You see children on the streets, vulnerable to sex abuse, vulnerable to narcotics and all sorts of ills. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to conclude that this office of Ombudsman is working legally and independently. It is independent of legislature, executive. It's client-oriented, but not anti-administration. Above all, it is freely accessible and visible in its efficiency and efficacy can be reached to certain heights that we have been able to achieve with the grace of Allah, and I'm confident that in the coming years we'll continue our services to the people of Pakistan. Thank you for your patience and time.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was supposed to conclude this session by giving you an overall recap. Well, I was supposed to give you a recap on the session. I'm going to spare you this agony. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you all to ask questions from the panel. We have till 11. Please feel free. You can ask the question and then we can ask them to respond. No, please, I think the gentleman over there has been given the mic.
I have a question for Mr. Salahuddin. We talk a lot more about the accountability of the judiciary and other institutions. How can we promote the accountability of bar and regulate the bar politics?
Have a conversation about whether it is sustainable for elected bar representatives to continue carrying on disciplinary functions. I think there is an argument to be made that those functions should be performed by lawyers or maybe even laypersons, as is done in some other countries, who are not elected, because there does happen, there is some conflict of interest created there. So I think that one step, I think, might, at least as far as the disciplinary functions of the bar councils are concerned, it might considerably improve the situation.
I have a question from Ejaz Ahmed Qureshi. Sir, over the period of time, we are seeing that the complaints which are coming to the federal ombudsman, there is no proper mechanism for implementation, because we see that subsequently after the decision, writ petitions are being filed in the various high courts for its implementation. So my question is there some proper methodology or some tool for implementing these rulings of the ombudsman?
I think it's an important concern, and it may affect some people. But overall, what we see is, although we deal with a large number of complaints, as I said, 106,000 last year, and already we have crossed 1. Our implementation rate tends to vary between 95 to 96% every year. We ensure that. We have the powers to implement that. Now, in some cases, any party can go to the court, and there's a writ jurisdiction, and they can exercise that jurisdiction. We cannot stop. Although our law says that, once a decision is taken by the federal ombudsman, its appeal lies to the President of Pakistan, and no court would interfere. But there are powers of the court, and they exercise it. And it's a very small number of cases where things go to the court. Otherwise, the common man's, the poor man's concerns are addressed at our level. He may be paying, just to give you an example, a bill of 4,000 to 5,000 a month, a poor man, and suddenly gets a bill of 50,000, 60,000. It's not a large sum, but for him, it's a large sum. He says that I have 40,000 income. How do I feed my children, give them education, etc.? So some of these concerns are very important for those people who are affected. And I'm glad that we are able to help and get those implemented 95 to 96%. Some in cases where people go to the court, then obviously the court have to decide finally.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My question is to the Federal Ombudsman. Sir, have you been cognizant or taking notice of the state of affairs in the sphere of education? The problems that arise in that area might not be understandable in terms of clear violations of rules and regulations. But there is a pressing need to take care of our education, which is deteriorating despite the proliferation of resources and institutions and the number of people, who are inducted in that area. No one will disagree that the typical teacher par excellence, the mentors of men, the makers of history, they are no more seen anywhere. And education has been reduced merely to a scheme of producing, some kind of creatures who could earn their living. So these are very pertinent issues. I wonder if you have had any thought on this, or if it is possible under your present terms of reference to create a specific division for that purpose, and you may hire good educationists, retired professors and others. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. I think as a society, we are concerned, we are worried about that in the education sector. Let me point out that educational institutions, colleges, and most of the universities come under the provinces. So our provincial ombudsmen address many of those complaints which come to their notice. In the federal ombudsman, we also get a lot of cases of students who have been enrolled in various universities, private universities, accreditation issues, and then we call Higher Education Commission chairman, and we try to help them. Then in case of private federal institutions, then there are authorities who are supposed to regulate affairs in educational institutions, and they have to be vigilant. So when certain things come to our notice, certain complaints are lodged, we call them also and make them accountable that why they have not been able to perform their duties. So a rectification system is in place as far as complainants are concerned. Regarding the larger issue, that's a systemic issue of our society. It's a much larger issue. Just to give you one example, some years back, when Chief Justice Saqib Nisar was Chief Justice here, right to education was one of the complaints lodged before him, and he held hearings, and then he was kind enough to ask Federal Ombudsman to prepare a report, practical report, for ensuring that right to education to Pakistani students and children. We collected many professionals. We collected vice chancellors, chairman of the Higher Education Commission, people who have been federal secretaries of education, chief secretaries, a fairly large group of professionals, and they gave us time, and we prepared those recommendations with the help of provincial government and Ministry of Health. Now that report was submitted to the Chief Justice, and he was kind enough to approve and pass it on to the government. But then governments change, they have a new government and they have their own priorities. So there is, for systemic issues, I think there is another mechanism. We have to go through the parliament, we have to go through the executive, and obviously the support of judiciary is important. We are prepared to play our role wherever we are called upon to, in the public interest.
I have to conclude the session. I thank the speakers, the eminent speakers. They've been very forthcoming, and they've enlightened us on very different facets of the criminal justice delivery system of Pakistan. They've invited us, they have recommended their suggestions, and I hope they've been jotted down, and we will make a report of that, and we'll make sure that we pass it on to the appropriate authorities who may consider them, and it's for them to execute them. We will pass on your suggestions to them. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Many thanks, Honorable Chair, Mr. Justice Yahya Afridi, and all the distinguished panelists. One thing that emerged, I think, very significantly from this discussion, and I have to thank the panelists for it in particular, I think Mr. Salahuddin Ahmed mentioned something that I think is very important in respect of connecting why we do this and what we deliver to the people. The big constitutional cases at the heart of why we do them and why they're important is to deliver to the people. Now, without much ado, if I can invite a senior puisne judge, Mr. Justice Qazi Faiz Isa, to the stage. Sir, मैं सबको बुला दूं, आप सबको बुलाएं।
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. A gender-neutral, time-neutral address to one and all. I have the honor to chair a panel of distinguished speakers, and I would please invite all of them to come because we are running behind time. So that all of them can come and take their places on the stage. I was supposed to speak before they did, but as you may observe, my session is about topics of which I certainly am not an expert, so I cannot possibly be audacious enough to speak before such distinguished speakers who I will introduce as their time comes. So I will speak at the end, once I've learned from them, and before the question and answer session. To ensure that we get in as many questions as possible, rather than the mic floating here and there, I would suggest that on a piece of paper, and pieces of paper are there with the ushers, you write your question and your name, and if you want to disclose your organization, please do so as well. And we will collect these questions, and at the end, I will read out the question on a particular subject, request the person who asked the question, name him, the person stands, so everyone knows who that person is, and then request the speakers to address the answer. I would request each speaker to kindly observe the very limited time of 10 minutes, and I know it's virtually impossible to do so in respect of in each of these topics, you can have 2-day seminars on. And so you'll have to do the best you can. I will now invite our very first distinguished speaker, and I just want to say, and I don't want to read their biodata, which is available in the booklet, and I won't be doing justice to them because they're far too accomplished to say anything about them in a few words. But all I will say is you can read them, you can check them up on the internet if you want further information about them. And the first speaker is, sorry. Okay. Who's that? I've just been informed that we'll not follow the listing of speakers as is because there's one speaker online from the US, and in case the line drops, so we'll go with the first, that speaker who is Who? नहीं? अच्छा. Is Dr. Iram Sitar? I will welcome Dr. Iram Sitar. Is she on the screen? Where is she? Maybe we should continue with the program as is. We're not connecting. So we revert back to the program. No, there she is. Welcome, Dr. Iram Sitar. Dr. Iram, yes, Dr. Iram Sitar will talk about probably the most important topic, not of the day, of the decade, of the century for Pakistan, at least in these troubled times of flooding. It is water, too little and too much. Dr. Yes. It's over to you, Dr. Iram Sitar.
Great, thank you so much. And I just want to make sure that you can see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, we can.
Should I assume you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Please continue.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I will try and keep to time. And as you just said, we could talk about this for days and weeks and months. So I will try and keep it succinct and hope that this is of some use. As you can see, we have titled the topic quite topically for us. For water people such as myself, these are long-standing themes. Here you see something quite beautiful, which is a moving, sort of soothing image of water. But as we know, water, when the cycle is disrupted, can be enormously destructive also. So I don't have to tell anyone that. Essentially, what we're going to focus on is the disruption of long-standing water cycles that have basically been something that human societies, especially we focus on the Indus basin in particular, for millennia of patterns that we have relied on to build a civilization. And those are now under challenge. So we're going to think a little bit about both legal frameworks and institutional obligations. And I want to challenge the people in the hall today, in the seminar room today, to really think about who you become and what your practice becomes as a result. So moving very, very quickly. What I want to just highlight is these broad themes, and I'll talk about them again, as I said, quite quickly. I would really encourage everybody to follow the UN Environment Program. They have an amazing, and I put the hashtag, it says Peace with Nature. They're really focused on how do we do development, but in a way that is, instead of fighting against nature, at peace with nature, and that has just more holistic outcomes. So again, everybody's on Twitter these days. Follow that hashtag, follow UNEP, read the report if you're interested. Just some broad themes to center. What we need to do, and we have not done, is really center the idea of risk and uncertainty in all policy development as well as implementation. Just think of those two things, risk and uncertainty. Those are of vital importance, because everything, please remember, has been destabilized. And we are in a century now, at least to 2100. So 2050 and 2100, that this is only going to get exponential. So risk and uncertainty are crucial. We cannot rely on long-standing patterns. Essentially, there is increasing water vulnerability. There are quantity, quality, timing issues. So every metric that you can think of is now more at risk and more vulnerable. Current floods, there's no need to sort of talk about that. That is being covered extensively. You all sort of have a sense of what's happening. There's a massive risk of displacement towards cities, which, if it's planned and orderly and towards a greater purpose, is obviously better. But in this completely disruptive way, the cities are not equipped, and there's food security issues, etc. While floods, I would like to point out, are quite viscerally visible, right? You can see them, we can all see them clearly, it's a problem. Long-term heat waves and droughts are also incredibly destructive. There are human health impacts, there's relocation issues, there's lower crop yields. Again, every metric is affected by dryness and heat, and that's important. As I think everyone will be mindful, if you look at the areas that have been affected, and if you look at who is affected, look at body composition of those people currently, and I hate to put it in these terms, but look around you in the room and look at the body composition of people around you. As you will be able to contrast, there's massive underlying nutritional and health inequality and insecurity, okay, that we are dealing with. So there is an injustice issue. Climate vulnerability affects the vulnerable the worst, and long-term economic sort of growth is also challenged. So what does a holistic sort of model of development require? One of the things that we really have to think of very, very seriously, these are problems broader than the judiciary, obviously, and the legal system more broadly, that we need enabled institutions at all levels, from the local to think the mohalla to like literally even the gully, and keep going up, okay? For both knowledge acquisition and cooperation. We need to train new professionals, and what I really mean is to become transparent, put data out there instead of hoarding it and putting it behind big firewalls. Really collaborative sort of knowledge development is going to become more and more important with the kind of risks that we're facing. We need new legal and interpretive frameworks that are, again, sort of just developed differently. And I would submit humbly that I do not believe that the legal profession nor the judiciary is at the moment equipped to do this. So this is a challenge to everyone, every single person who is a trained lawyer, who's a working professional. This is a challenge. So what can the judiciary do? It needs to build its capacity, because I'm a big believer change starts with looking inward at home. If I have a problem, I have to deal with it, I have to get better, etc. So build capacity and really try and interpret existing laws, that a lot that we've inherited, as we know, right? We have a colonial legal inheritance for a 21st century model of development. For both people and ecosystems, it can be done. There are plenty of examples from around the world and jurisdictions. We can take existing norms and interpret them for where we are heading into this present century. We need a lot of consensus building by including the voices of the unheard, and I would suggest that the legal profession in particular has a role to do that. And what that means is it's really important of who's around the table, who's in the conference rooms. Is it only so-called experts, right? Or is it the affectees? And how do we give more of the voices to the affected, because they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, and we really need to start respecting it and privileging it. So getting different groups and cohorts into conversation and around the table is something that the judiciary in a collaborative way could really encourage and build as a norm. What I would suggest, one, because I also want to keep to some of the legal themes, is that I think that there are a lot of very well-established, long-standing, and very well-developing principles and norms of international water law that I think we should be using within national jurisdictions. And what that means is all levels of Pakistan's federation essentially take inspiration, and there's no need to sort of like apply it wholesale. In any case, these things are more norm-based. So really the idea is take it, adapt it, but really think that there is something to learn from global knowledge development also. Essentially, if I distill that down, we can do it quite quickly. The idea is that there should be equitable and reasonable utilization of, in this case, water. And the principle of no significant harm is very important. So what that means is, really be mindful of these and apply them to the jurisdictions. I'm going to do this very quickly. I'm not going to go through these in great detail, but I've mentioned the basic principle that we can take, such as from the Berlin rules developed, announced in 2004, agreed in 2004, take global norms, implement them in country. There is, I've highlighted, you can see some of these colors in the slides, and again, I am happy to make these available so you'll be able to see them, that there is an obligation to manage equitably and reasonably, and an obligation to cause no serious harm. There is overall balancing. So this is really context specific, right? You need a lot of contextual knowledge. Again, getting excluded voices into conversations is going to be very important. A balancing of different goals that you're trying to get from similar, from whatever the resource is, right? Again, the participation point I've sort of really sort of stressed already. We are very, very bad, and I say this very sincerely, at what is conjunctive use, which means use surface water, use groundwater, other waters, and develop legal norms in a comprehensive and unified manner. The water cycle is linked. It's just that human interaction with whether you encounter water in a river or as rainfall changes. But the water cycle is linked, and we need to develop a very sophisticated understanding that this is, this has to be managed conjunctively. Essentially, really think of integration not just of water, but think other resources, land, other inputs, whether that is of knowledge or technical resources, satellite data, you name it. Everything is in the 21st century a resource. So think broadly of integrate water with all of these other resources that it goes in conjunction with. And really take seriously the idea of the precautionary principle, which is minimize harm. That doesn't mean you don't develop in its traditional sense, but really think broadly and think for the future. So the precautionary principle is, I would submit, a good model for us to think of. This is my last slide because I do want to keep to time. This is technical, and I'm not going to go into any detail, but again, I'm very happy to deal with it question and answer and sort of later. What I really want to focus on, because this is becoming a big conversation point at this point in time, right? This idea of loss and damage, what does the so-called developed world owe to the developing world? These are important problems. What I just want to focus on is the cost of capital in developing countries. Essentially, the point is that the longer you wait to start putting these things in place, putting adaptation and mitigation measures in place, the more expensive things will become, because one, the underlying resources will deteriorate, plus the risk and uncertainty will go up. And essentially, we understand that because of lower and weaker sovereign ratings and borrowing costs, borrowing costs of developing countries will increase with time also. I mean, we've all seen where interest rates are going at the moment, for instance, which raises the cost of borrowing. So these are sophisticated, serious problems. I do not think, in all humbleness, that the legal profession is ready or understands these things with the level of sophistication that we need, it needs to be understood. However, the legal profession and the judiciary more broadly is and can become poised to really take account of these, get expert knowledge, get expert information, and say, look, we need to start moving in this direction. So I just wanted to flag that as time and uncertainty and risk increases, the cost of capital is going to go up, which would behoove all of us to take as much action now and plan for the future today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Iram Sattar, and for keeping within the allotted time. And thank you for putting us in a place that these are far too complicated matters for the judiciary to understand, which reminds me of the famous line of the reticent, dirty Harry, Inspector Callahan, a man should know his limitations. Well, we do know our limitations, so I'll hand you to another expert, an expert from Tajikistan, a neighboring country, Dr. Bakhtiar Kadyrov, and he is with the United Nations Population Fund, but its acronym somehow reads as UNFPA. I don't know why not UNPF. In any ways, a very warm welcome to Dr. Kadyrov.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Umar Atta Banjal. Honorable Justice Qazi Faiz is a senior judge, Supreme Court of Pakistan. Honorable Justice Yahya Afridi, Honorable former Chief Justice Tasadduq Hussain Jilani, Honorable judges, lawyers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a distinct honor and privilege to be among you today to speak about population dynamics. And I would like to start by sincerely thanking the Honorable Chief Justice and the entire organizing team. First slide. As you know, Pakistan became the 5th most populous country in the world, surpassing Brazil in 2018. The top 5 countries currently are China, India, United States, Indonesia, and Pakistan. The country's population dynamics and growth rate of 2.4% during the intercensual period have been impacting the rate of urbanization and migration and almost all aspects of socio-economic life in the country. While there are almost all aspects of socio-economic life in the country, as you will see in the subsequent slides, if the current population grows by 2030, we will need 8,500 more schools or 19 million houses with the growth rate of 2%, not 2.4%, even 2%. Next slide. Out of population 236 million in 2022, 68% are below the age of 30. To turn this youth bulge into a demographic dividend, Pakistan needs to invest in long-term human capital development, including education, employment, health, reproductive health, and expanding opportunities and rights for young people, skills and opportunities for young people. Thus, the dividend can only be reaped with the right policy interventions, focusing on the 3 E's, as I mentioned: education, employment, and empowerment, including women's and young people's empowerment and opportunities for them. This slide provides Pakistan's population, which was 33 million in 1947, 207.7 million in 2017, and which is expected to be 338 million by 2050. And then this is according to the United Nations Population Division's medium projection. While the population growth is high, as I mentioned, at 2.4% in the intercensual period, which is impacting the socio-economic development because contraceptive prevalence rate is low and remains stagnant at 34% overall, for modern methods 25%. Unmet need for family planning is high at 17%, ranging which is equivalent to 5.5 million women of reproductive age. The unmet need for family planning, those who want to prevent and delay their pregnancy but cannot access information and services, family planning related information and services. Therefore, the total fertility rate is 3.6 children per woman of reproductive age. And therefore, age dependency ratio is high, which is 79 dependents for every 100 working age population. below 79 dependents below the age of 14 and above 65. So it's to be noted that not all working age population are employed. Mostly you will see the subsequent class about the consumption and the employment. Usually the consumption income is higher than consumption starting from the age of 28, 30, but prior to that the consumption always prevails over income. It means that not all the working age population are employed. Working age population constitute 56%, requiring decent jobs. Youth bulge population under 30 years of age, as I mentioned, constituting 68%, require socio-economic investments, including education, employment, creation, and social participation. Pakistan ranks 145th out of 146 countries on the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index, lagging behind almost all Southeastern Asian countries. And why? Again, as I mentioned, because of low female labor force participation at 20.3%, high maternal mortality ratio 186 per 100,000 life births. What it means, 186, it means every year 11,500 women die because of the pregnancy complications, preventable pregnancy complications, pregnancy and childbirth complications. Child marriage, 18% married before the age of 18, for those aged 20-24, close to 4% before the age of 15, also for those aged 20-24, which affects the school attendance, education, and health, and high prevalence of gender-based violence as well, spousal violence. In 2020, there were almost 8 million child marriages and more than 7 million cases of spousal violence. Next. Sustainable development cannot be achieved without assuring that all women and men, girls and boys enjoy the dignity and human rights to expand their capabilities, secure their reproductive health and rights, find decent jobs, and contribute to sustainable development. So here you see the two options, missed demographic dividend and demographic dividend realized. In order to realize demographic dividend, meaning that with the declining fertility, there will be more young people entering the workforce, and the young people, if they need schooling, decent education, employment, to realize their potentials, and also addressing child marriage. In this slide, the first challenge in converting the youth budget into a demographic dividend is addressing the low educational attainment and literacy, especially for girls, and then also considering the fact that Pakistan spends only 1.5–2.5% of GDP on education, much lower than the other international benchmark, or the international benchmark of 4% of GDP for education. And also the gap between male and female education levels and attainments, enrollment rates, is also one of the factors. And then we know that there is established link between education, economic growth, and low fertility. And then one of the factors of why the fertility is stagnated and family planning uptake and contraceptive prevalence rate and the population growth is high is also because of the child marriage and then gap in education between girls and boys, and then also school dropouts because of the child marriage as well. All of this keep the fertility rates high, population growth rate high, contraceptive prevalence rate high. And then educating girls especially creates many positive outcomes for economic development and poverty reduction by improving girls' income earning potential and socio-economic status. Next one. This is you see about the education and child marriage. Here for different age groups. Next slide. This is also you see about the unemployment rates, and especially gender disparity. So lower female labor force participation at 20.3%. Next. You see it's about the labor income and consumption, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide. This is also about labor force participation, as I mentioned, low female labor force participation. Next slide. It is also about the fertility rate because of the low contraceptive prevalence rate. Next slide. It's regional disparities. We see regional disparities across in different provinces. The total fertility rate ranging from the national average 3.6 and lowest fertility rate, total fertility rate in Islamabad 3, to highest in newly merged districts 4.8. Next slide. Here also disparities, provincial disparities. The maternal mortality ratio is high, but there are provincial disparities with the highest maternal mortality ratio in Balochistan, 298, or child marriage and other indicators. Here you see with the growth rate, the country would need 8,500 more primary schools by 2040, 19 million more houses by 2040. Also, this is given the current children out of school, 22 million, and then also 38% children in the country are standing short for their age. Infant, 253,000 infants died within 1 month after their birth. Maternal mortality ratio 186 equivalent to 11,500, and the 5.6 million births annually. The next. This benefits at the individual level. With the investment in family planning, we can reduce maternal mortality ratio to 52. Next. And the benefits at the individual household level. This is also how to bring about demographic dividend and economic growth through investment in education, employment, and empowerment. Next slide. And then policies and legislative frameworks. Next. We start about the human rights case initiated by the Supreme Court in 2018, Chief Justice. There were two suo motu cases, one on water scarcity, the other on population growth. The Chief Justice that time in 2018 established a task force. The task force came up with a set of 8 recommendations on establishing task forces, recommendations on universal access to family planning, reproductive health, legislation related to family planning, curriculum, engagement of community influencers, contraceptive community security, and also including legislation as well. Then you see the recommendations of the Supreme Court were approved by the Council of Common Interest. They are called Supreme Court Council of Common Interest recommendations on family planning, population dynamics. And then next slide. So I will talk about this more. These are the recommendations of the Supreme Court, 8 recommendations, also related to financing family planning programs, contraceptive commodity security legislation, including child marriage restraint acts, and then also reproductive health bills at the federal and provincial level. Next slide. Here, this government identified, based on the recommendations, 3 key thematic areas: universal access to reproductive health, contraceptive commodity security, advocacy and communication, and all the engagement of the private sector, social safety networks like Benazir Income Support Program, in family planning programs. Next slide. And then here also the government initiative, the federal and provincial task forces were established. The federal task force is chaired by the president, provincial task forces by the chief ministers. Parliamentary reform on population was established. National action plan developed, COSET National Action Plan, which aims to increase contraceptive prevalence rate from 34% to 50% by 2025. And 60, 2030, reduce total fertility rate from 3.6 childbirths per woman to 2.8 by 2025, 2.2 by 2030, and also reduce population growth rate from 2.4 to 1.1 by 2030. Next. So Here, a national narrative is based on the interlinked principles of rights, responsibilities, and resources. Right means it's the children's rights to education, children's rights to nutrition, health, and also shelter and clothing, and also the tawazun between household resources, state resources, and natural resources. This is the three interlinked principles: rights, responsibilities, and resources. And the parents' responsibilities for their children's education, and state responsibility for children's education, health, nutrition, and shelter. This is the national narrative, which is one of the recommendations of the Supreme Court Chief Justice in 2018. Next. Recommendations now: high-level oversight of the COSIT National Population Action Plan. Totally now the COSIT Action Plan constitutes 1.3 billion. Available from domestic resources 802 million. The gap is 510 million for family planning programs to implement the recommendations of the Supreme Court. Dedicated financial resources to be available for the COSIT National Population Action Plan. Ensure uninterrupted supply of contraceptives. Next one, tax exemption on imports and local production of contraceptives. Encouraging public-private sector partnerships and partnership with international financial institutions, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and others. Scaling up universal access to reproductive health information and services, and scaling up reproductive health and family planning programs. Next, building human capital to create and realize a demographic dividend. Building human capital requires investing in skills and opportunities for young people, including reliable health information, quality education, decent employment, strengthening maternal and child health services, universal access to right-based family planning services, including through identifying functional or structural integration of health and population welfare departments, services, elimination of gender-based violence and harmful practices, including child marriage through child marriage restraint acts, ensuring the availability of disaggregated data to inform policies, programs, and their monitoring. Thank you. Thank you. This is all the program. Over the past 4 years, we have been working to implement the 8 recommendations of the Supreme Court related to population dynamics and family planning. Thank you very much.
A very warm thank you to Dr. Bakhtiar Kadirov. He brought a mirror and showed us ourselves. We don't look good. But do not let his gentle, polite demeanor undermine the shocking statistics. He mentioned about tawazun, another word for the Holy Quran, al-mizan. It's all about balance. So once again, thank you, Dr. Bakhtiar. We now come to the emerging issues and innovations in climate justice and governance to implement the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, probably the most talked about topic in the world. And to introduce you to the topic is Mr. Ali Tawqir Sheikh. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished justices and ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be part of this August forum. In fact, in my excitement to be part of this forum, I forgot to ask when committing to this topic that how much time I would have. It's only later on that I found. So I've decided to take only 7 minutes instead of 10, and then from my body language, you'll know I'm interested in extension or not. Fair enough? Slides, those who are helping me will need to move forward to the next one. The contemporary jurisprudence on climate change related has a very short history, barely 50 years. Started with Stockholm Convention in Stockholm Conference Declaration in 1972. That has impacted just about every multilateral environmental agreement that has been signed since. Pakistan is signatory of at least 14 MEAs that got their inspiration from the very first one. And in this realm, I'll explain a little bit more. The second realm is 30 years ago when UN conference happened in Rio de Janeiro. That's where some of the principles that were outlined in Stockholm were taken up and adopted. And those principles are now gone to several judgments all over the world. And the third one is UNFCCC convention, framework convention, that has led to this. Now, the very first one where we are dealing with conventions is mostly dealt with a judicial challenge or signing the planning or commenting on planning, licensing or permitting. The second one that deals with 30 years history, that's usually the constitutional and legal rights. And that is in this domain that most of the jurisprudence in Pakistan has happened. Compared to the last one on company law and common law. So there has been development in all four domains, but most importantly in Pakistan, in constitutional laws and human rights, as many of your judgments will say. The conventions that were signed, many litigants have not come to the courts as yet. And far fewer litigants have come on company laws and private laws before the Pakistani courts, as far as I can understand. The last one is getting more prominence and importance now, perhaps centrality, primarily because it is now about nuts and bolts of implementation, such as Kyoto Protocol, such as Paris Agreement, such as Kargil Agreement that was recently signed, such as IPCC reports, implementation or interpretations of those, such as NDCs that the countries are submitting to the convention. So it is in this realm that most of activity has begun to happen in the world, and this includes international climate finance institutions, and there is a plethora of them globally and in the country. Next one. Now, it is not in a particular order, the way I see it. Public interest litigation, the most celebrated case has been Shella Zia case in the country, and that seemed to have found space in most of our judgments, based on the principles that we know very well. The one up that you see, green benches, tribunals, and Murray Declaration and things of that sort have been languishing now. They need new blood, and they need to be reinvented, to be made robust the way they were initially envisioned. And that's where most of the problem is arising right now. Superior courts have given good judgments at times on many issues, but that is where policy and regulatory and compliance issues come. That is. Article 9 has been the most important intervention of superior courts in Pakistan. And it has not only given life to the Constitution by broadly defining life, but also judgments have talked about intergenerational rights. They have talked about rights of other species and ecosystems. And yesterday, as the Honorable Chief Justice was mentioning, it has also talked about climate democracy. So this is the area of extreme creativity and innovation that we have experienced. The next one. Several international principles have found space in the judgments. I have mentioned only a few, if this slide comes in front of you. Most important has been the precautionary principle. Don't want to take your time for it, But of course, several judgments have also invoked in dubio pro natura. That is a very important. Climate justice is very important. Public trust and randomness doctrines have been very, and I've mentioned some judgments, some case laws that I referred to some of these. I want to take very quickly to a journey of some judgments from my point of view, and kindly the gentleman or the lady who is running the slide, I want her to be quicker, faster with me now. Please go to the next one. Precautionary principle that goes beyond, I take one judgment in Bricklin. Government thinks only about pollution and clean air. The judgment thinks about food security. Then in other one, government thinks about forestry in terms of tree plantation. The judgment thinks about adaptation. And oftentimes not used or understood, invoked by the judiciary is the notion of maladaptation that is at the heart of IPCC report. In urban planning, some of the judgments have been groundbreaking. They have moved into areas where globally Pakistan could be spearheading, such as urban adaptation and climate resiliency. And also you see that how far the urban planners have been asked to think about the zoning, as we see that Pakistan is under siege from housing societies and village and town levels now, that is eating up at food security in future. It also talks about, judgments have spoken about species and biodiversity, and Western laws mostly restrict about the animal cruelty, but in our case, I think we have gone beyond that and say human rights cannot be protected unless the rights of other species are protected. And this way, the climate rights, human rights, and rights of other species or animal rights are integrated in the Pakistani jurisprudence. Lastly, I want to show you in one slide that yesterday the Honorable Chief Justice mentioned. Implementation tool, Pakistani judiciary has experimented with something which is very unique to us. It's still an untold story. This is constituting judicial commissions. And there have been 8 or 9. And now I've seen there's a trend in the last 2 commissions, in the Climate Change Commission, in Asghar Lagari case, and Islamabad judgment case, where it's implementation commission that also empowers the commissioners to go to the institutions such as coordination council between the provinces. I want to come to my last slide quickly because I think, where do I leave you? Instead of getting into self-congratulatory mode, my question to you, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, is that has this been a personality-driven journey for us, or a critical mass is shaping up? That's a question I can leave. I also see that some of the judgments have been random and contrary and to each other, and there is no consistency at times. And going forward, how we are going to resolve that. We have also seen that in some judgments, there has been disregard for compliance from the court, chose to be aloof itself. And supply chain is, someone has mentioned it earlier. I want to mention last bullet here. Low carbon development is a new area of legislation in many countries. Climate compatible or climate smart development is another one. In recent days or weeks, you must have heard again and again about loss and damage. A vocabulary includes just transition so that those who are on the wrong stick of climate change right now or economic development right now should not be again on the wrong side of the stick when transition happens. Example I want to give you, I had lunch the other day at a market. There were rechargers for Audi or Mercedes or someone, but not two-wheelers and three-wheelers. That is the wrong side of the stick I'm referring to. And then, of course, there are measurable tools and arenas of action emerging in terms of net zero transition of this world. And the timelines given by IPCC are very stringent, extremely ambitious. No country can be relaxed about it, and nobody can claim that I am not a major emitter. Pakistan, of course, is not a major emitter, but Pakistan's emissions are comparable to all the Nordic countries in the range of 1%. And that's the level of waste that we have in our country. And more than 160 countries in the world emit less than Pakistan. So it is not about emitters' justice. And we need to be absolutely clear that the climate justice is as much a domestic agenda as it is international. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali Tawqir Sheikh, for an excellent overview on climate change conventions and environmental conventions and reference to relevant case law from Pakistan. Before the 2022 floods, which have engulfed us, there were another flood some years ago, and a colleague of mine, Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, did an excellent report on that. And if you have time, you must read it. One wonders if the calamity which has befallen us would have been so severe if some of the measures mentioned therein had been implemented. I would now like to welcome, changing gear completely, on Financial Action Task Force, Mr. Mohammad Iqbal, who will enlighten us about this subject. Please give him a warm welcome.
Honorable Chair, Justice Qazi Faiz Isa, Honorable Justices, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. In the past 4 years, Pakistan has undergone a unique and challenging situation of its times in adherence to the anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism obligations and international standards. It was unique because no other country in the world has undergone 2 FATF assessments concurrently. First was the Pakistan's mutual evaluation of 2019 against the FATF standard recommendations on technical compliance and immediate outcomes on effectiveness. Pakistan performed very poorly in that assessment, leading to a large number of recommended actions. And second, before that, in June 2018 was the grey listing of Pakistan, with a target of 27 actions to be completed against several timelines. And in this backdrop, Pakistan had also been receiving stern warnings to be downgraded to the blacklist in case the action plan is not timely and fully completed. So before I come to where we stand now, let's have a brief look of the FATF. The 39 members Financial Action Task Force, as we know it, is an intergovernmental body that develops and promotes policies to prevent and protect the international financial system from drugs money, from money laundering, and from financing of terrorism, and from the proliferation financing. The footprint of this organization is universal. It has its own regional bodies across various regions, and it has given certain permanent observer status to a large number of international organizations and institutions, such as the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD, the ADB, a number of United Nations bodies. And not only that, this organization draws its strength from a number of United Nations conventions, as well as United Nations Security Council resolutions. One recent being of 2019, in which the Security Council has urged all countries and jurisdictions to implement the FATF recommendations. So what are these recommendations? They are generally known as the global best practices, as we know, and they comprise of 40 recommendations and 11 immediate outcomes. The recommendations basically are the FATF benchmarks of technical compliance for legal, policy, and institutional frameworks. And the immediate outcomes are the benchmarks for enforcement measures, with tangible enforcement outcomes against these recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's come to the challenges that Pakistan has been facing in the past few years. As I mentioned before, we were handed over an action plan of 27 actions in June 2018, and that action plan was focusing entirely on the combating of financing of terrorism. Simultaneously, we were handed over another action plan, and that was in June 2021. And this action plan actually emanated from the recommended actions from our mutual evaluation, 7 of which were translated into an action plan, and this time this action plan was focusing on money laundering. So altogether, we had 2 action plans in hand with altogether 34 actions which were required to be completed against several timelines. Now, how Pakistan responded to this challenge? The first and the foremost requirement was the highest level political commitment to implement these action plans, which Pakistan, I believe, has demonstrated over time. Second, Pakistan undertook its first standalone terrorist financing risk assessment for identifying and assessing how the terrorist organizations raise or move funds for acts of terrorism in Pakistan. This was followed by a more comprehensive national risk assessment on money laundering and terrorist financing. And these risk assessments were imperative to guide the investigators and the competent authorities for risk-based investigations and the preventive measures. Third, an interagency coordination mechanism across the law enforcement agencies, both federal and provincial, was established. And in fact, there were more than one mechanism. For example, there is a National Coordination Committee, there is a National Task Force on CFT, then this JITs under Section 19 of the ATA. The role of the JITs was expanded also to investigate the financing of terrorism. Then there was a multilateral MOU that has come in place between several federal and provincial law enforcement agencies for exchange of information within the ambit of their respective laws. Historically, ladies and gentlemen, we would investigate terrorism. That was a problem in our country, but we would shy away from investigating funding thereof. Therefore, Pakistan came up with a standalone policy for financial investigation of terrorism cases, and that policy requires all law enforcement agencies to undertake both proactive and reactive financial investigations in terrorism cases. As a result of this policy, there was a manifold increase in the number of the terrorist financing cases across the country, which have also culminated into a large number of convictions. In case of money laundering, Pakistan has carried out a significant number of money laundering investigations, fostered the international cooperation mechanisms, initiated an AML-CFT supervision of the non-financial sector, such as the real estate agents or the jewelers, and also have continued with the confiscation of the proceeds of crime. For all this and many more actions that Pakistan has taken in the past 4 years, there was a need for a strong legislative framework. So what we did is that we amended 14 different federal and provincial laws in the country. So we have an amendment in the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2010. We have 3 amendments in the Anti-Terrorism Act of 1997. We now have a standalone Mutual Legal Assistance Act of 2020, and so on and so forth. Consequently, as against 10 recommendations in technical compliance in 2019, we are now compliant or largely compliant in 38 out of 40 recommendations, ranking one of the highest in the world in the area of technical compliance. Ladies and gentlemen, all investigations are futile unless the criminals are brought to justice and convicted for their offenses. This brings us to the judicial response during the grey listing of Pakistan. The FATF requires effective proportionate, and dissuasive sanctions to be applied to natural persons or legal persons convicted of money laundering and terrorist financing offenses. The response of the judiciary, in my opinion, was two-pronged. First, considering the fact that there was a very limited, rather negligible number of terrorist financing investigations and prosecutions before 2018, as the focus was mostly on the terrorism side, the judiciary undertook its own capacity building and enhanced its own understanding of the CFT regime in the country very expeditiously, in my opinion. This also included the terrorist financing provisions of the Anti-Terrorism Act 1997. Second, which was more important, was that judiciary took the path of proportionality and dissuasiveness. So within the available range of sentencing that we have for the terrorist financing convictions in the ATA, the judiciary swiftly moved towards the higher threshold of the sentences. In my opinion, and if I'm very honest, the ATCs, the anti-terrorism courts, have played a very critical and pivotal role during this particular challenge that Pakistan was facing. And I believe that as we exit the FATF grey list, and I think that will be very, very soon, inshallah, I think the role and the response, the judicial response, particularly of the ATC, I think that must be acknowledged. To conclude, driven mostly by our own AML CFT strategic deficiencies, Pakistan was facing a challenging situation the past 4 years. While the FATF process and evaluation for us was unprecedented, I believe that our response was unprecedented too, and so was the judicial response to this challenge. We now have, as we all know, that we now have completed all the 34 actions of both action plans and are expecting a formal exit from the grey list very soon. But what I think is that it remains in our best national interest that we continue with preventing, investigating, and prosecuting the crimes of money laundering and terrorist financing. And for that, we also need to continue with the capacity building of our investigators, prosecutors, and the judiciary. With the adequate legislative frameworks now in hand, with the operational procedures they are now in place, and with the lessons learned from the recent practices, I think this positive trend must be sustained for the benefit of our own selves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for enlightening us about the Financial Action Task Force and what it has done and what Pakistan is required to do. I would now request Mrs. Fawzia Vikar, who was the Punjab Commission on Status of Women chairperson for a number of years, to enlighten us about how best to, that her subject is inculcating gender responsive approach in judicial system. Please give her a warm welcome.
Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, Honorable Chair of the panel, Justices, esteemed participants, Assalamu alaikum. It is indeed a privilege for me to be here and to speak on a topic which is extremely important and yet very difficult. And I say difficult because of the fact that when you talk about gender or when you talk about equality of women and all, it has two reactions generally. One is that of disbelief, as in we don't believe what you're talking about. The condition of women does not need any special focus. And the second is of anger about taking people away from the more important tasks, for example, of economic challenges, security, and others, and talking about things which are not really that much of a priority. So I do thank the Law and Justice Commission of Pakistan for inviting me and the honorable committee that was managing it to talk about this issue which touches nearly half the population of Pakistan. and that nearly half the population of Pakistan needs equality of opportunity, equality of access, and equality of outcome. Whenever we start talking about gender equality and a gender-responsive approach, we focus a lot on inputs, but we don't necessarily focus on the outputs. Hence, the importance of the equality of outcomes. I was very encouraged by the Honorable Chief Justice's speech and reiteration of the need to uphold fundamental rights of marginalized people yesterday in his speech at multiple occasions, as well as the court's commitment to upholding the rights of the marginalized community. However, women's unique issues in access to rights, resources, and entitlements, even when enshrined in the Constitution and enforced through various specific articles of the Constitution, like the Article 25, which enjoins on the state to take special measures to promote the equality of women and children. Despite all of this, we see a widespread discrimination and poorer outcomes for women in terms of their education, employment, health, representation, ownership, as well as control over resources, including the right to inheritance, despite the availability of all the legal and institutional mechanisms to address these rights. If I can have the next slides, please. As you see here on the stats, that the literacy rates for women 10 years and above shows a disparity of nearly 21% between men and women in 2022. Out-of-school children are disproportionately more females. Even in terms of exercising the political rights, we have a disparity in voter registration, even though much work has been done over here. We have a weak labor force participation, despite the need to make this 50% population participate in the growth of the country. We have physical violence that was also shared by Dr. Bakhtiar. And the house ownership, you see, is of just about 3% for females. But the last figure that I want to talk about a little is the transition from the higher education, secondary education to labor market, and that's what we need to focus on, because while many girls are getting educated, they are not necessarily joining the labor market, and that speaks to the social and institutional barriers that they face. Can we move to the next slide, please? Hence, Pakistan on the Global Gender Gap Index, or Global Gender Index of 2022, is placed at 145 out of 146 countries. Even Sudan and Yemen have slid up, or rather have gone up, and now only Afghanistan is faring worse. I show you these stats not because you probably don't know, but just to remind you that all the work that we are doing is not necessarily resulting in equality of outcome that this court is a guarantor of and a protector of. So, therefore, we have to counter the various the work, or rather the challenges that are available or that are encountered by the women, not just in the judiciary, but also in the executive and the legislature, if we want Pakistan to go beyond the second last position in the world. Next slide, please. When it comes to access to justice, even though women and men both face challenges in accessing justice due to various resource or social constraints, women experience additional and different barriers in their ability to access justice. It is due to various economic reasons, for example, the lack of money, we all know, and which translates then into limited social capital also, necessary to navigate the justice system. And I don't just say judicial system, but the justice system. The social and psychological barriers, which include the stigma for fighting for your own rights, the challenges of mobility, time constraints, etc., women having to tend to the housework, and spending a lot of time on it. It also, one of the barriers is also the educational challenges, which means not only limited education, but limited access to information and social networks that I've talked about. These, along with others, keep women back. Can I go to the next slide? Hence, on the Women, Peace and Security Index, Pakistan is placed at 167th out of 170. Again, just with 3 countries below us. And this is a composite index which talks about inclusion, security, and justice. Justice measures both the formal and informal discriminations, or discrimination in both the informal and formal justice systems. And it essentially talks about not just the discriminatory legal framework, which fortunately we don't have much of, but it talks about discriminatory norms. And I think that's where I'd like to peg most of my conversation today. Next slide, please. So, because of the paucity of time, naturally, I can only focus on a few things. And the 4 factors that I want to focus on in terms of the justice system, the key challenges, are related to A, environment. Environment meaning the physical environment that women encounter when they go into the justice system, which is from the police to the courts, but focusing more on the courts. The process, which I'll dilate on a little bit. The social norms filtering into judgments, and I focus only on the judiciary here. And representation of women in the judiciary, which links with the environment, because looking at women in the judiciary just gives more hope to other women who feel like they now have better chances of justice, because no matter how sensitive male judges are, there are still some lived experiences that you cannot, you really can't have, and you can only share with people who have those same experiences. Hence, these 4 factors will need to be addressed when the justice system, when we talk about the justice system. Next slide, please. So, in the justice system, we know that women, not just women, but everyone, we heard about pendency. But the pendency, and I've taken some figures on gender-based violence cases specifically from, that was on the 31st of May 2022. In the gender-based violence courts was 16,840, and you have various figures over here, but the last figure, which is taken from, which naturally impacts women, but the last figure which is taken from the Punjab courts only, and no disrespect to Punjab, it's just that they have the best data most of the time, and more accessible. So from the GBV courts, we saw that only 2.3% conviction rate for sexual crimes was seen of the 3,442 cases during the time frame of 1st Jan to 31st May of 2022. The next slide, please. And just a quick look at the judiciary. But I'm not going to dwell too much on all of these, which you see. Much better numbers. You have civil judges who constitute now about 25% of the entire judiciary, in fact a little bit more. But in the higher positions, you still have very few women in judiciary. Needs to be addressed if we want better gender mainstreaming, or a more gender-sensitive response and approach to in the judiciary. Next slide, please. One area that I really want to dwell on is the role of the judges in, and again, no disrespect, because we are honestly reflecting on our successes as well as our failures, and this is certainly not a failure. This is just some of the don'ts, and I'll later show you what are some of the do's that we see in judgments that perpetuate social norms, because social norms are shaped by many institutions, but judiciary also has a very, very big role to play in perpetuating of the harmful social norms also, as well as promoting good social norms. So here you will see a few judgments, and I've pointed out to those which show that language can actually lead to promoting or perpetuating those social norms, which is why on the Women, Peace and Security Index we fare quite poorly. An older case, it's a rape case that you see, where the judgment says that it is interesting to note that according to the allegation contained in the FIR, the petitioner had been seducing the complainant for zina for a long period, but inaction on the part of the complainant to bring the same to the notice of the police or anybody else speaks volumes on her part. This blame the victim mentality, or invoking a victim's or a woman's character to minimize violence against women, this tells you I mean, this is reflected in this particular judgment. Further on, also, I don't want to dilate too much on it, but in this case on Sabir Hussain alias Pehlwan versus State in 2007 case, it talks about the sacredness of the human life, but it also talks about how we cannot divorce from the prevalent social setup, traditions and customs prevailing in our society. Here you still see that customs trump human rights, the fundamental human rights that we have not only signed off to or signed off on through our constitution, but also through the various international commitments and treaties that we have undertaken or rather signed, including the treaty which is the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the Universal Periodic Review Report that we submit, the various other treaties, the human rights treaties that we have signed on. Quickly, the next slide. Just a few more cases of what language not to use if we want the judiciary to become more gender sensitive and responsive. Here you see that the norms and social values again have been used to trump human rights in the judgment itself, and the decisions have minimized violence. They have assessed the credibility of the case on non-material evidence. They have rejected, as a matter of fact, charges altogether and perpetuated rape myths like women must violently resist, otherwise we don't have any evidence of rape or sexual crime. Next slide, please. Again, another case that I don't want to spend too much time on, but in this, I just want to remind the honorable judges over here that while a woman was beaten up with a sota from the spot, and he and his by a person, and he and his son had then collectively given only 3 injuries to the complainant, the case was a run-of-the-mill case of domestic violence based upon estranged matrimonial relations. Reminds us of the case yesterday of domestic violence, where a woman was beaten to death here in Islamabad in a very, very brutal manner, and I hope there is going to be redress of that cases like that, and domestic violence will not be minimized again. Moving on, please. Quickly to the next slide, please. Next. I'll just take a minute to read this out from a judge of Brazil, who says the failure to prosecute and convict the perpetrator is an indication that the state condones the violence. The condoning of the situation by the entire system only serves to perpetuate the psychological, social, and historical roots and factors that sustain and encourage violence against women. That general and discriminatory judicial ineffectiveness also creates a climate that is conducive to domestic violence, since society sees no evidence of willingness by the state as the representatives of the society to take effective action to sanction such acts. Going towards the end, next slide, please. Just a reminder, lots of good laws have been passed. We have the legal framework in place. We have administrative machineries also in place, albeit with some delays. For example, the commission that I was introduced as chairing formally is without a chair 4 years hence. I left it in 2019. We still don't have a chair. Dedicated women's machineries need to be made functional. Next, please. Next, please. The environment. Many measures have been taken to improve the environments for police, medical legal cadre, the courts also. I really would like to thank the Honorable Supreme Court for the announcement, or rather the establishment of the gender-based violence courts. Those have been a game changer for women, because just not to have to face, as a victim, not to have to face your perpetrator is enough for a woman to speak up for her rights. Therefore, in the courts, the information desks, hopefully the washrooms, the sitting rooms, all of these facilities are going to, they have already started to bring about changes, but they are going to further contribute very much to the change. Second slide, please. The next, second last, that is. I don't need to remind you of all of this, but the crux of this slide is, when it comes to gender-based violence, especially sexual violence, and I focus on it because that is where the women feel most underprivileged. Just the adoption of the measures in the Anti-Rape Investigation and Trial Act passed in 2021 would take care of the lot of missing reporting, rather, or the challenges to reporting, because they require joint investigation teams, the anti-rape crisis cells, independent support advisors, legal aid to the victim, as well as various other measures like in-camera trials and all, which are just enforcing that right to an honorable hearing and with dignity, or enforcing that right to dignity that women often do not have. I want to congratulate the court on many wonderful judgments. The next slide, please. Where they have, through their judgments, reminded the administration of their responsibilities. And I particularly talk about a couple of cases. Can you move next, please? Sorry, lots of slides. Next. One of them, of course, being the Asif Salim versus Chairman, Board of Governors, University of Lahore, in which Honorable Justice Jawad Hassan reminds us of the fact that more women are working. To provide them their right to work and work with dignity is an important measure, and that timely grievance redressal mechanisms are fundamental to that. Here he also invokes the various international commitments that Pakistan has in order to promote gender equality. Next, please. Similarly, the landmark rulings on two-finger virginity tests, not only at the High Court level, but also at the Supreme Court level. Madam Justice Asha Malik, Sadaf Aziz versus the Federation case, where she declared the two-finger test as discriminatory against the female victim, as it is carried out on the basis of gender, and therefore offends Article 25 of the Constitution. The similar case brought to the Supreme Court in Atif Zarif versus the state, where the Supreme Court held that reporting and recording the sexual history of a survivor by conducting the TFT is contrary to Article 24. Next, please. Women's inheritance rights may be, there are various judgments, including the judgment of the Supreme Court, which held in favor of the female heir 25 years after her father's death. And in another judgment, the Supreme Court took cognizance of the fact that the brothers had no moral ground to oust their sister from inheriting their father's property, and that relinquishment is opposed to public policy. Next, please. And if I can just go to the last slide, please. No, that is the slide before. Well, it's not showing here because of some technical glitch, but I'm just going, yeah, this is it. This is the way forward. It talks about all the 4 factors which are major challenges to women's access to rights, and gives some suggestions for improvement. Dedicated facilities is one of them to improve environment, which includes all the factors that I've outlined already. Information counters, simple measures is that. Functional gender-based violence courts. We have 112 gender-based violence courts. We are very grateful for it, but they need to be made functional with all the facilities that are given in the Act for those. Even mobile courts to increase access for justice. In terms of the process, we have endless issues. I was very happy to hear from the police and the prosecution. But starting from that, going to the courts, there are various challenges, and the courts are requested to remind the administration of the need to bring into, rather to implement all those measures which are provided in the law, for example, in the Anti-Rape Act, in order to operationalize or implement the law. Simple measures, and we heard about it, like digital technology, will also increase a gender-responsive approach and better experiences of women in the judiciary, access to legal aid, representation to develop a critical mass, so that not just we don't just have one woman representing all the women of Pakistan in the Supreme Court, but many more, and in the high courts and in other courts. And lastly, and most importantly, mindset change, which is required if we want judiciary to be the leaders in changing society, which comes not only through capacity building activities like sensitization and trainings, but it also comes from performance management, and it comes from linking the gender equality outcomes to appraisals of the judges. I thank you all for giving me a patient hearing.
for presenting some horrific statistics. And if I may, on behalf of the judiciary of Pakistan, apologize for the insensitive language used in some judgments. There is no excuse. Now, if I may address myself. Please feel free to stand up, stretch yourself. You've been a very attentive and polite audience, so you've earned it. You can stand up if you want to. I won't mind it at all. I've been asked to chair a complicated session. We started with phenomenal population growth in Pakistan, about water, both too much and too little of it, with which Pakistan is afflicted, about climate change with which the entire world is afflicted, about the Financial Action Task Force, which in 2001 was further tasked to combat terrorism financing. And it is in this context that it is very important to determine financial stability in Pakistan as well, that is future financial stability, because the danger of the blacklist hovers. And last, but certainly not the least, was gender. How does one bring together all these diverse subjects? Let's start at the beginning. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. I start, and so does the Constitution of Pakistan, which then proceeds to recognize the sovereignty of Almighty Allah over the entire universe, and that the authority to be exercised by the people is through their elected representatives. We have been given the task to administer a sacred trust. But to clarify, I want to say that today I don't speak in a court of law, I don't speak as a judge, but do so as a citizen of Pakistan, and to be more precise, as a Muslim citizen of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. And taking guidance from the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, I shall proceed to demonstrate that neglecting the teachings of the Holy Quran and the example of the Prophet has caused these immense problems. Therefore, to mitigate, firstly, and eventually, hopefully, to resolve, we need to discover the lost path, the Sharia, which literally means the path or the way. This does not in any manner mean that the other faiths and people do not have solutions. So I have collected the 5 topics. 2 I'll address first, which is in a way related, water and climate change. And then I will address the 3 remaining topics, population growth, gender, and terrorism together, because there is some nexus within them. First and foremost, water and climate change. The Holy Quran comprises of about 6,000 verses, of which 750 are on environment. There are 28 chapters of the 114 chapters of the Holy Quran which name nature or natural phenomena. That is about 1/4 of the Holy Quran. The cow, the cattle, the bees, the ant, spider, elephant, star, moon, etc. Almighty Allah is Al-Khaliq, the Creator. He is Rabbul Alameen, God of the worlds, plural. He has 99 names or attributes. Amongst them is the artist, Al-Musawwir, the originator, Al-Mubdi, the giver of life, Al-Muhyi. By the time Hazrat Adam and Bibi Hawa, Adam and Eve, were placed on earth, the temperature gauge was perfectly set. And so it stayed over thousands of years. But then we discovered how to burn fossil fuel and started to do so with abandon, resulting in global warming and its consequence, the dreaded climate change. We stand now on the precipice, or in the case of Pakistan, are sliding downwards, as demonstrated by the extraordinary quantity of rainfall that fell this summer, followed by flooding, which has left large parts of the country still flooded. And this is now being followed by the dreaded dengue, malaria, dysentery, gastroenteritis, and innumerable other waterborne diseases. How did this come to pass? The Quran describes human beings as the best of his creation, Ashraful Makhluk, the perfect creation, and the best and Ahsanul Taqweem. And what is our role on earth, and what does our Creator call us? He calls us Khalifa fil Ard. If you want a reference, it's Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 30. We are stewards of the earth. We have to take care of the earth. We have to take care of all living things. And what is the message in the Quran? Do not act wickedly and spread corruption in the earth. Surah Al-Araf, 7th Surah of the Holy Quran, verse 74. And is not burning excessive fossil fuel doing just that? And do not waste, because the Holy Quran says Allah does not love wasters. This is verse 31 of the same surah. What is happening today, we have been informed about in the Holy Quran as well. And I quote from a verse from the Holy Quran, Surah Ar-Rum, 30th verse 41. Corruption has become evident on the land and the sea, and the people have caused this by their own hands. And what is the solution to all this? I think it is in another verse of the Holy Quran, in Al-Furqan, the 25th chapter, verse 63. Walk gently or humbly on the earth. Yamshuna alal ardi hawnan. First and foremost, we must attend to the needs of the desperate poor, of the dying, of the starving, of the mother with her 6-7 children on a highway, who's pregnant. How can we do this? We must open our purses. Give to the Prime Minister's flood relief or to any charitable organization any amount, 1 rupee. Can you imagine 220 multiplied by 1 rupee? That's the population of Pakistan. Or anything that you can do. Or if you don't have money, help in kind. Sorry. This is essential. It will show us our humanity. It will unite us. What if you was to ask me, we can talk about very fanciful things to do, but there are simple things to do as well. How can we reduce the effort of climate change? The poor do it, they walk. The poor do it, they use a bicycle. These two functions, natural functions, the West has rediscovered. And there'll be cities in the West where you won't find priority given to vehicles. It will be given first to the pedestrian and then to the bicycle. and then to the public transport. Can I envisage a world, can I envisage Pakistan, where from this day onwards, the government, all the governments of Pakistan, the provincial as well as the federal, stop providing cars to judges, to bureaucrats, to army officers, and with the same amount of money, buy buses, fix pavements, make cycle paths. You save on your import bill, you save on contributing global warming gases into the atmosphere, and you become healthy as well. And this is the way of the Prophet too. He shared his ride. He did not occupy it with his companion, and he asked them to ride it in turn. And what more can we do? We can't solve climate change. We can certainly mitigate against it. Another factor, and a very easy factor in mitigation, would be to plant trees, an abundance of trees. Pakistan's forest cover is one of the lowest in the world. I've been reading the figure of 4% since the last 40 years. So in other words, that it has stood static, though in reality it is not so. But the fact is we don't have proper statistics. So we have denuded Pakistan of trees. We can simply plant a tree. It doesn't cost much. It doesn't cost anything really. Does our religion have something to say about this? Yes, it does. Doomsday arrived. A companion of the Prophet asked him, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, if doomsday comes and I have a seed or a sapling in my hand, what should I do? The answer was, plant it. Akhirat or shajarkari, think about it. Another, either we have too much water or we have too little, as a distinguished speaker had earlier mentioned. What does our faith teach us about it? Do not waste water, the Prophet said. A companion responded, what if I'm using it for ablution, for performing prayer? The response came, and even if you're standing next to a flowing river. The devastation that has taken place is, because one of the reasons is, because rivers have been narrowed down, the areas around them where there used to be natural spillage has been taken over, construction right at the mouth, at the edge of the river. This too, Islam prohibits reading prayers where there are water channels. This is a established hadith. So there are many ways to start mitigating. We don't have to be taught by the West. We don't have to be taught by the United Nations. We have to relearn what we have forgotten. I shall now come to the other three related topics of population. First of all, first and foremost, population growth. Horrific statistics have been presented. I'll present another. 50 years ago, we had a country comprising of two provinces, East and West Pakistan. Its combined population was 132 million. West Pakistan became Pakistan, East Pakistan became Bangladesh. In 1972, the population of West Pakistan was 60 million and East Pakistan was 72 million. Today, in 2022, the population of West Pakistan is 230 million and that of East Pakistan is 168 million. We jumped by 170 million. They increased by 96 million. We were 3.8 times is our increase, and there has been 2.3 times. Why the difference? We shared the same faith. We are both predominantly Muslim countries. One reason could be because we banished family planning and they embraced it. And who is the better for it? There are other statistics which I don't need to go, but you can check up between the two countries and where they're heading. Family planning has become a taboo in Pakistan. And this happened on a false assumption, lack of knowledge about one's faith, and for political reasons. The Holy Quran doesn't enlighten us about contraception. The theological view of classical ulama are jurists and scholars of Islam, was that what is not prohibited is permissible. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, authorized coitus interruptus. The ulama were united in their view that there was no moral significance in destroying the male or female seed. But then the United Nations Population Conference took place in 1994 in Cairo, Egypt. And, believe it or not, the Vatican delegates and some political ulama joined hands. Coitus interruptus was the sin of Onan, son of Judah, who married his deceased brother's wife, Tamar. Onan, as per Genesis 38:8, was destroyed by God. So, for this sin, from there we get the word onanism. Classical Islam said the very opposite. They were all unanimous in their view on this. They went even further. The question of abortion has taken the United States by storm. The classical ulama had a lot to say about it. Almost all the mazahib, except probably the Maliki mazahib, the majority of the Maliki mazahib, there are exceptions there as well, accepted this till the 16th week. Why? And they base their views or analogy or discussion, ijtihad, on hadith, which said that till the ruh, the spirit, is blown into the fetus, or rather till ensoulment takes place, it is nothing. An example given by the classical jurists of Islam was it would be as if the crushing of a date stone, which is not equivalent to uprooting a date palm. Amongst the fundamental work that the superior courts, by which one means the high courts and the Supreme Court, does, is the enforcement of fundamental rights. Fundamental rights, the most significant of which is the right to life, Article 9, compulsory education for everyone, boys and girls, Article 25A. Both came under attack in Pakistan. Another horrific statistic that I want to share with you, determined by the Global Terrorism Database from 1970 to the year 2019, was that there were 1,000 attacks on educational institutions in the country. The Supreme Court, a judgment I authored, delivered a judgment on the Sangota public school case. This was the only girls' school in Swat attended by 1,000 girl students, which was bombed and closed for 5 years. This is Civil Appeal 71P of 2014. You can check it up on the Supreme Court website. We are then faced with, we are negotiating with terrorists. Who does it? And what is offered? What do they do? What do you say? Please bomb 5 schools and not 6. Please take some money. Please give you some weapons. What is on the negotiating table? Where do these negotiations take place? Who authorizes them? The only negotiation which a true Muslim can have with a terrorist in the garb of Islam would be to present him with the Quran and Sunnah. What, after all, is the first commandment of Almighty Allah to us? It is Iqra, read. And this is the command form of the word. Those of you who know Arabic, Iqra is a command form. It's like stop, when on the road sign says stop, that sort of thing. So it is the first word. What does this 96th surah, which is actually the first surah, goes on to say? It talks about the kalam and ilm. And if we want to move to the example of the greatest human being, what did he do when he took prisoners at the Battle of Badr? He asked them, because Muslim community was mostly illiterate, teach 10 of them to read and write, secure your freedom. Then we have another horrific thing happening in Pakistan, which is called, I don't know why it's called honor killings, which is an abomination. There is a law in Pakistan which I categorize as a dead letter law because it is not implemented ever. And this is one of the few laws which derives directly from the Holy Quran, the text of the Holy Quran, and that is the offense of qasf. And I will now cite the Quranic verse. And those who launch a charge against chaste woman and produce not 4 witnesses, flog them with 80 stripes, and reject forever their evidence. For such men are wicked transgressors. This, to allege, impute a character of a woman, requires a far greater standard of proof than is required for murder or a financial transaction. Here you require 4 adult witnesses. So can you imagine? There is no comparable crime in the world. Qasf is not an offense in what we generally categorize as the developed world or the Western world. And this is done over 1400 years ago. Qasf, the concept, is completely alien in the West. It's not civil, it's criminal. How many prosecutions of qasf take place? I'm not aware of any. Then our faith, we are taught to respect women. It's not to be good-mannered, it is to abide by your faith. Islam is probably, I'm not a scholar of religions, but what limited I know is the only faith where a woman, the footsteps threaded by a woman are followed by every Muslim at least once in his lifetime, if he or she can afford to go to Hajj. And that is Sa'i. The footsteps, or where the distressed mother of Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam, Bibi Hajar, walked and ran, and this we emulate her steps. She is not an isolatory example. There is the great lady Khadija bin Khuwailid, referred to as Ummul Mu'mineen, the mother of all Muslims, independent, a successful businesswoman, employed the Prophet and proposed to him. Can you imagine this happening today? And she was 15 years his senior. Think about it and reflect. She then, after her death, the Prophet married Hazrat Aisha bint Abu Bakr. Was she a lady who stayed at home? No. About 3,000 hadiths. She is the narrator of them. She taught in the mosque. She participated in battle. This is what our faith tells us about the great ladies. This doesn't stop there. Some scholars would come and quibble and say, these are the wives of the Prophet and different stress. No. Then Hazrat Umar, may the Almighty be pleased with him, appointed Shifa bint Abdullah as a market inspector in Medina. And I would probably end on the Islamic aspect by quoting Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. Ignorant men dominate women. Non-discrimination is embedded in Islam. And who is the greatest, who is most honored by the faith? And I quote the Quranic verse from Al-Hujurat 49 chapter verse 13. Quote, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is the one who is the most righteous. Not man nor woman, no gender specificity there. And how did this country come into existence? It came into existence with Bi Amma, the mother of Maulana Shaukat Ali and Maulana Muhammad Ali, an equal companion on the select 21 member, or varied from 19 to 21 member of the Central Working Committee of the All India Muslim League. She was your freedom fighter for you. There was not the only exception, Jahara Shah Nawaz, who participated in the Round Table Conference in London long before Pakistan. There were other distinguished ladies as well, Fatima, Shamshun Nisar, Mahmood, Shaishta Ikramullah, members of the All India Muslim League Council. Then we had the Women's National Guard. This is what the founder of the nation left us, which we have systematically taken apart. And then his sister, after his death, showed us the way to democracy. So, with these words, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all, and I would most of all like to thank the very distinguished speakers who opened our eyes to many of the things we were not aware of. Please give them a resounding applause, please. Now I get to my other duty. Collected quite a few question and answers to save time. This is from Mr. Afzal, Senior Civil Judge from Balochistan. He wants to know about escalating threat of global warming or climatic changes, and what has the judiciary done about it. Does anyone want to answer that? I had mentioned the report authored by Justice Mansoor Ali Shah, and there are other instances. Would you like to respond? What has the role of the judiciary been in dealing with escalating threat of global warming or climate change?
Well, it depends on the litigants that will go to the court. The court can interpret the law, and it has given, I shared a few, and I shared only a handful of judgments which are groundbreaking. I think it has, as I use the word, enriched the Constitution to redefine the word environment. It has established the importance of protecting other species and biodiversity, and it has also given us judgments dealing with extreme events. I particularly want to mention a very small case, not very well known, a public interest litigation in Sindh after the heat wave, where Karachi Electric had shut down electricity in certain areas during the heat wave. And litigants went there that it denies our right to decent life. And then the court imposed on NEPRA's recommendation 10 million rupees to Karachi Electric Company. So in this way, the environmental rights are on the table for the judiciary. People are better educated who can give several instances, but I know that Pakistani courts have been quite forward-looking. The weak area, as I mentioned earlier, is in our tribunals. They have not been very functional.
No,
it is on green benches. They have not been functional. Thank you.
Only in the judicial.
What's happening? I may be paraphrasing a few questions.
She went all the way to...
One is probably addressed to Dr. Iram Sattar, if she is still there, how we should save our water or make best use of it. The questionnaire doesn't write his or her name. Dr. Iram Sattar, would you like to take that?
I can take it very briefly. I think one of the things that is that there are two approaches. One is you try and increase supply. The other try and I think we really need to start focusing on that. The one example that I would like to give is the nation of Netherlands, Holland. It is one of the biggest exporters of food products in the world. And given its landmass, a lot of which is underwater, the Dutch, as we know, are experts at holding back the water and living in peace with water. They have really made a kind of agriculture that is the future. Which means that on far less water supply, they actually have a massive production system and they export food. So one of the things that Pakistan really needs to start thinking about is turn the conversation all thinking all to maximize efficiency of existing supplies and then see where we go from there. We just need to pivot the conversation to maximization and utilization.
Thank you. There's a question for Dr. Bakhtiar Kadirov, and this is from Umid Ali, an additional district and session judge from Balochistan. This question is how to persuade and convince common Pakistani people, that birth of a child in hands and control of couples, not to get married early, and what is the proper age to get married?
Thank you very much. First of all, regarding awareness raising, one of the recommendations of the Supreme Court's suo motu human rights case number 17-599 is about engaging ulama and community influencers, one of the key recommendations. The second, also developing national narrative on the advocacy communication, developing behavior change communication, and national narrative on population. The national narrative population is the first ever rights-based in line with the principles of the religion, the principles of Islam, tawazun, balance, tawazun between the rights, responsibilities, and balance. It's about, in Islam, it's clearly reflected, the rights of child are clearly reflected, their right to education, proper upbringing, nutrition, health, housing, shelter, clothing, all the rights are well reflected. Therefore, in line with the principles of the religion, first of all, parents are responsible for ensuring, securing proper education, upbringing, and housing and shelter. This is about the rights, the children's rights, and the rights of citizens to have access, universal access to family planning, reproductive health services, and the balance between the resources of the family, community, or individual household, the state resources for education, employment, and social services, and the natural resources. the balance. Therefore, it is unlike the previous number-based narrative of the 60s, which was Duba Sheikh Khushal Gharana, or the narrative of the later 1973, which is about Hamdu Hamaradu, which the people did not identify themselves.
Can you repeat the second one?
Hamdu Hamaradu. Two of us,
Hamdu,
ours too.
okay.
Us too, ours too. This was in 1972, Duba Sheikh Khushal Gharana in the 1966, 67, in the 60s, in the early 70s, Hamdu Hamaradu. But that one, the people did not identify themselves. Now it's rights-based in line with the principles of Islam about respecting and realizing the rights of children, and then also the responsibility of parents and state for children's education and well-being, shelter, and also striking a balance between the household resources and the state resources and natural resources. And I think this time the rights-based narrative should work. And also religious leaders, for example, they developed a kind of cookbook based on the national narrative, which will be also used during Friday sermons. This is about behavior change communication, and engagement of religious leaders and ulamas is very essential in this as well. Recently, there was a consultation on child marriage, and then religious ulamas, scholars visited an obstetric fistula center in Karachi, Gohe Hospital, and then they witnessed one of the consequences of child marriage, which is obstetric fistula. So the health consequences of child marriage, and then they stated and called for a campaign to increase awareness of the population of child marriage, which will be a way of also addressing family planning issues, fertility issues, and population growth issues.
Thank you for that very comprehensive reply. And if I may add, it's really a thought. Before going on the prescribed Hajj, the once in a lifetime, it's only mandatory on you if you can afford it, and provided you can have left enough provisioning for your family for a period of 2 years. So one can take guidance from that as well. When you're planning a family, can you provide for that child for the next day, for the next month, let alone 2 years? Isn't that guidance? Then we have the example of the Prophet, the age he got married at. So these are various things which already exist. The next question is, I don't think I should answer this. It is by ex-Joint Secretary, Mr. Asif Ali Tamboli of the Islamabad High Court Bar Association. Do you think that the actual stakeholder is satisfied with the judicial system? I think I should pose this question to the audience. All those who think are satisfied, please raise their hands. We've got a F grade. So we secured a F there, as well as in all the other bad horrific statistics. And this, I think, is related to a question by Dr. Ziaullah Ranja, who is an advocate of the Supreme Court. And it is, how can we transform our judiciary, enabling it to handle increasing number of cases of a rising population of Pakistan? I will respond by saying, Dr. Ziaullah Ranja, since you must have some thought about it, please write a paper on this. It's an excellent question, and send it to all the judges so we can learn from you. And if anybody else has any suggestions, they can also do so. So coming now to, this is another undisclosed person. To cope with global warming, we need more plantation everywhere. I think everyone will probably agree with that. Does anyone of the panelists want to comment upon that?
Unfortunately not. Trees alone will not solve the problem. There is sufficient carbon in the air that even if by a miracle we were to become a zero-emitting civilization, all countries, it cannot be reversed. Monsoon pattern has changed. every successive years in our lives will be hotter than the previous year. And what we can say, the trees are important in many other ways to help us stabilize our land, protect topsoil. They are good carbon sink, and so on and so forth. But in terms of climate change, we will now need to think way too much more than just the trees. And we don't have sufficient land. Different ecosystems have different requirements. We cannot keep on planting trees. They'll be competing with us, human beings, and our other species. So there's a limit to this. We need to recognize that.
Oh, well, with profound respect, I disagree. As many as you can plant, do plant. When we reach that stage, when there are too many, then we can be told stop planting. I've been told by the organizers that we don't have any time, and I can only take the last question. And this last question is from a gentleman by the name of Muhammad Iqbal, and it is directed towards me. Quote, a newly established law directorate at the GHQ is tasked to research and render legal advice on constitutional and international issues. Why can't we have coordination with them? Thank you. I did not know that the army has now undertaken this task. I, for one, am more than ready to render coordination and tell them how to operate tanks and artillery machines if they want, or if they want to or if they want to learn from what little one knows about the constitutional and international law issues, they're welcome to invite me or any one of us. Once again, you've been a remarkable audience, and I can't thank the speakers enough for their dedication and the time that they took out. And thank you very much. Do you want to make an announcement now?
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Honorable Chair, and thank you, panelists. This was certainly a very marathon session, and however, addressing the biggest issues that face our nation: water, we talked about population, we talked about climate change, gender inequality, and we are facilitated by the fact that the Honorable Supreme Court has addressed these earlier as well. In an HRC case, I won't, for paucity of time, go into any detail, but there are Supreme Court judgments that talk about right to life and talk about various steps that can be taken to solve the water issue. I will only quote one line from a Supreme Court judgment that says, the threat of overpopulation or population explosion is a doom the country is unknowingly moving towards if a national crusade for population control is not launched in time. So as far as this session is concerned, I will leave you with that. We will be now announcing a very quick lunch. And before we head out, it's very important to know that today we are thankfully blessed with 2 exits. And there's a left wing and a right wing. The ushers are going to facilitate everyone moving out sequentially. But of course, my Lord, the Senior Puisne Judge, and the judges, the Honorable Chief Justice and the Supreme Court judges first, will be moving towards the judges' block for lunch, and followed by the High Court judges and all the judges. So lunch is served, but everyone will move out sequentially, starting, of course, with the Honorable judges. So we reconvene here in 30 minutes. 40 minutes at most. We will restart at 2 p.m. sharp, we will restart. 2 p.m. we reconvene. Thank you very much.